Awesome. So welcome, 6 steps to tame the busy. And that's going to allow you to really improve your life, gain peace of mind without sacrificing your productivity, your impact, your success. This presentation is really for the busy professionals and the ambitious leaders. Now, I'm Dr. Toni Warner McIntyre. Some folks know me, some folks don't. So if this is our first time virtually meeting, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. I am a mom. I'm a transformational life coach for the ambitious. I'm also an experienced psychotherapist. I have a separate business as a private practice as a licensed clinician, and I am a formal behavior specialist as well. So I've got lots of experience under my belt to share with you all today. I'm going to encourage you to take notes because I will be sharing some juicy information with you today, and it's hard to digest it all at once. So take your time, write the notes out. This is going to take us about 45 minutes, possibly an hour, depending on how we flow. And I am going to, again, remind you to mute yourself upon entry because this is being recorded for that replay. You'll have access to the replay for 48 hours. Now, whether you're watching the replay now or you're joining us live, please know that my presentations are typically paid. And so I'm offering this free as a gift because so many people are needing this right now, and I just see countless folks struggling with it. But this is why I can only offer it free for that 48-hour replay for a limited time. So please use it while you have access to that replay. I really do encourage you to do that. This is for folks that tend to set high standards for yourself. You're an action taker, you're an impact-making individual, so you care about the impact that you're making. You care about your relationships, you care about your contributions. You're either an ambitious leader or maybe you identify as a busy professional. Whatever it is, you desire things like more time freedom, more time to spend with the people that you love without having to sacrifice your productivity, without having to sacrifice the impact that you're making at work or at home. Perhaps you desire wanting to stop feeling guilty about where you're spending your time, about how you're spending your time, about who you're spending your time with. Perhaps you want to feel more clear-minded so you can be more present with the folks that you're with when you're with them. Maybe you really want more energy, more motivation on a regular basis because that's something that's lacking. If you can relate to any of this, know that you're not alone. Perhaps you feel the need to strive for excellence constantly, relentlessly, or perhaps you're striving for perfection. Maybe you're overly considering what other people want or need or feel to the point where it is causing anxiety or overwhelm or doubt. Perhaps you easily feel disappointed or irritated and that bothers you because that's not really you. It's pretty uncharacteristic. Perhaps you're feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. There's so much pressure. Or you're worrying about how you're being judged or how you're being obsessed in some way, somehow, all of the time. And you're just spending too much time replaying what you should have done or what you should have said differently in your mind to the point where it's affecting perhaps how you sleep, or it's creating this fog in your brain, this kind of clutter in your mind that's hard to get rid of. So much to do and never enough time. Perhaps you're feeling like your emotions are really difficult to control, whether they feel like they flood you or they feel you just want to get rid of them and you want to just cut yourself off from them and not deal with them at all. Perhaps you're feeling pressure to perform. You may be, if you're here, someone that has worked yourself to exhaustion or maybe even beyond. If you resonate with any of that, you are absolutely in the right place. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we're connecting because I have a lot of information that's going to be incredibly powerful for you. I'm Dr. Toni. This is me here with my oldest, getting my PhD. I have currently, at the time of this recording, I have a 3-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, I have an almost 11-year-old, and she is just like her mama. She's going on 11, going on 21, but I love her so dearly. I've been a psychotherapist for well over a decade now. As I said, I have my own private practice and I love my therapy practice. However, I branched out into life coaching and found that I have this deep passion for being able to bring those parts of me that love being a therapist to a different level of impact in different areas of the world with different folks in a way that it does overlap with therapy, but it's not the same. So there are differences, there are nuances there that are really key that I'm happy to talk with anyone about if you have any questions about that. But I have found that I love both therapy and life coaching. As I said, I was a formal behavior specialist, so I have done tons of work, behavior plans, family support with managing their children's behavior. I mean, I could go on and on about that. And I love that work too. That was just a different kind of phase of my life. And I'm right here with you. I'm a fellow ambitious leader, except that ambition drove me to burnout multiple times. I prided myself on helping others, excelling no matter what in what I do, and being a really hard worker, an ethical worker, creating and achieving goals after goal after goal after goal, and needing to achieve it no matter what, like hustling, trailblazing, multitasking, doing whatever I needed to do to make that goal happen. Nothing could stop me. I'd prove people wrong. I'd prove judgments wrong. I'd prove stereotypes wrong. Yet I wanted to appease everyone. I wanted to consider everyone else's thoughts and everyone else's feelings. And ultimately what happened was I did become outwardly successful in many ways. I nearly always met my goals, and I always did well for the most part, and I earned multiple degrees. So I had this high standing experience and role within all of the places that I worked with all of the people that I worked with and supported. But this really cost me. Now, I'm not going to say all of those pieces are bad or wrong, but when they pile up year after year after year without exception, it's like a pressure cooker inside. And that leads for a lot of issues to happen. And that's what happened to me. I had things like restless legs. Maybe some of you can relate. It was really hard to sleep. Every night, I wanted to get sleep, and I just struggled so hard to sleep. I'd have to put the TV on in the back. I mean, just so many things that I tried. And some things maybe worked a little, but most things didn't. I had these body aches and pains that I couldn't explain. This fatigue, I wound up going to specialists to find out what my medical diagnosis was, because I couldn't figure out what it was. Like, why am I having these aches? Why am I having these pains? I'm pretty young. Why is this happening to me? And they couldn't really put their finger on it. I had to get scans, the whole kit and caboodle. I actually at one point started losing hair due to the stress. And I started to have these onset of panic attacks, which had not been my prior experience before that. I was really reaching this place in my life where I was not really feeling like me. I had this uncharacteristic irritation with my kids, a lot of resentment towards my partner, and this extreme self-criticism, this self-doubt that plagued me. But of course, no one knew. I didn't want anyone to know about it. So I felt emotionally isolated because I kept most of it, if not all of it, to myself. And I felt really lonely. That led me to have increased anxiety symptoms, increased depressive symptoms. And as a therapist, that was hard. I had a lot of shame around that because I didn't want people to know that. I figured I should know. I shouldn't be dealing with things like this. And that really led to this. I shouldn't say it led to it, but it built up this insatiable need to keep doing, to keep moving, to keep accomplishing, to keep proving. And that over time is what burnt me out. Perhaps many of you can relate. I've talked to so many folks that can relate to this kind of cycle. Marital issues, just this nagging sense of, it's like a cycle. I would feel sad, I would feel guilty, then I would feel frustrated for feeling sad and guilty. Then I would exhaust myself and I'd be angry about it. Then I'd feel resentful, and then the cycle would repeat. And it was draining, it was exhausting. I was so scared to change too much though, because I didn't want to lose my ambition. I didn't want to lose my drive. I was like, if I don't have that, then what do I have? I'll be less successful. I'll be less valuable. That's what I told myself. So that's what I believed. And it really burnt me out, even though I earned my master's in clinical social work as a working single mom. And I rose to or supported top leadership in nearly all of my occupational positions. And I earned my second master's in education while working full-time as a newlywed after planning a DIY wedding and having my second kid. Plus, I earned my PhD in human sexuality while I was working full-time right after having my third. So I was nursing, I was hustling, I was maintaining my home and taking on the mental load, and for the bulk of the years, also the financial load as well. It was just too much. Something had to change, but I was scared for there to be too much change. I was like, I accomplished all of this. If I change, then what? What's left? But also I had reached most of my goals. So something had to give. I want to ask you, what's it costing you? the busyness, the lifestyle of chronic stress, of endless to-dos, it is costing you something. Are you clear on what that might be? Maybe it's issues communicating with your spouse. And so it's creating partner issues or intimacy issues or marital issues. Maybe it's caused you to get quick to anger, irritation with your kids, like I experience, like so many I speak to experience. Maybe it's that there's little or no time to actually be with your family, to be present with them. And so your relationships are getting strained, whether you're a mom or a dad or a friend or just a partner to someone you deeply love and care about. Perhaps you're similar to me, you had unnecessary medical issues. I speak to a lot of folks that have unnecessary medical issues, or the medical issues they have are amped up because of the added stress. And we know statistically that stress increases issues across the board, including medical issues, right? Mental health issues as well. Maybe for you that looks like migraines, issues with menstruation or intimacy issues. How about those insecure or like self-critical thoughts, that doubt, that kind of beating yourself up? Maybe it's eating away at your time because it's making it difficult to focus, or it's keeping you overwhelmed or feeling out of control. Perhaps you're struggling with staying on top of everything because it keeps piling up and piling up and piling up, and there's just never enough time and never enough energy to get it all done. Feeling like maybe you have to choose between sacrificing your success and ambition or actually enjoying your life with your friends and your family. Like you have to choose between health or wealth. Or maybe it's costing you this relationship that you desire to have more at work or with colleagues or staff because you've become so frustrated. It's hard to be patient with them. It's hard to be patient with yourself. A lot of people I speak to, they're wondering if there is more out there for them. Part of them knows and believes there is, but they have no idea how to access it, how to tap into it. And in fact, wanting more almost leads them to feel guilty because they're like, well, I just need to be grateful for what I have. Like, why is what I have not enough? What I learned along my journey is how to intervene in this cycle, whatever that might look like for you, and how to prevent it from continuing to happen. And in order to do that, I use my proprietary 6 foundational steps. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So my promise to you today really is to share these 6 foundational steps, and that these 6 foundational steps are life-changing when they are consistently and appropriately implemented. I cannot, will not, and do not guarantee you in particular a certain set of results, because who you are as a person, how consistently you implement, how appropriately you implement, that can all, there's too many factors, right, to tell you specifically as an individual across the computer what's going to happen for you. But I can tell you these 6 foundational steps are absolutely life-changing when they're effectively and consistently implemented. And if you stay till the end, I'm going to offer you opportunity to gain even further support with me via the Q&A and a few other offers that I want to support you with, some gifts for you. So if you go ahead and stay till the end, you'll gain access to that. As we jump in, just consider if you've ever felt out of control. Most of us can raise our hands for that, right? Or maybe just felt the need to be in control. And did you notice that the tighter you grasp for control, the more out of control that you feel? Have you ever noticed that? Maybe you try to be more productive, more efficient, and as considerate as possible. But somehow things build up and your plate just gets more and more and more full. You're chronically busy, chronically stretched, and still, even though you're doing all these things for all these people, fulfilling all these roles, it's still not enough. That is why the first foundational step is to take back control of your schedule, because taking back control of your schedule helps you to take back control of your life. Now, no matter how simple this sounds, it's really not super easy to implement. And if it was, right, I wouldn't have anyone to support. So it is. There's so many people that struggle with this, and I myself was one of those people. I'm going to tell you about Mark just to demonstrate an example. Mark was incredibly reliable. He was someone that was an amazing problem solver, super efficient. He just prided himself on being responsible and caring. But he was so available. In fact, too available to the point where he was never not busy. His schedule was jam-packed. He was on mode all the time. He didn't know how to turn it off. He was really great at pleasing people, at leading people, at helping people, but he didn't have any time for fun or friends or rest. He didn't have any time for his family or even just to take care of himself. And as far as he was concerned, he didn't even need to take care of himself, right? Because he had all these other people he needed to take care of first. But what wound up happening was after he was on mode all of the time for years on end, he started to disconnect from his partner. Not intentionally, not because he wanted to, but because he was literally stretched so thin. His kids started to get upset because they weren't seeing him as much. And even when he was there, he wasn't really there. He wasn't able to really be present. And that just agitated his marriage. So Mark felt guilty because the more he tried to do to please people, to help people, to be there for his family, the more he'd disappoint them because there's only 24 hours in a day. And Mark was trying to stretch those 24 hours way too thin. It's not possible. This is so important because life is made up of time, if you think about it. And time is non-renewable. If you are not intentionally spending your time, then you will unintentionally misspend it. You have to be intentional about scheduling your priorities. That means you have to know that when you're saying no to one thing, you're saying yes to something else. If you are saying, no, I can't take on this additional thing, perhaps what you're saying yes to is being present with your kids. Perhaps what you're saying yes to is your health or yourself. Perhaps what you're saying yes to is your partner. When you say no to one thing, you are saying yes to something else. And so you need to get really clear about what makes up the domains of your life, in your relationships, at home, at work, so on and so forth, and prioritize every single domain on a regular basis. This is not a one and done thing. Now, here's the kicker. Most people don't realize that underlying this whole scheduling thing are beliefs that are dictating how you're spending your time. And that's what keeps people stuck. They'll be like, oh, I got a calendar. Oh, I tried to schedule X, Y, or Z. It's not working. That's because of these underlying beliefs that are not being assessed and addressed. You have to assess these beliefs that are keeping you stuck. They're keeping you believing that you have to stay busy in some way for some reason. So Mark, for example, he had these beliefs that he had no idea that he had them. But after digging, we found he had these beliefs that he had to overcommit to others. He had to overextend himself at work. That was the only way that he'd actually be valuable. And so if he stopped doing those things, he no longer felt valuable. Once we could dig there, we could make this shift. And then he found out that that's not true. If you don't get clear on these dictating beliefs and get intentional about your schedule, then you will continue on this kind of hamster wheel, right? As many people describe it. You're going to feel like your responsibilities, your to-dos, the chaos of life is running you instead of you deliberately managing them. And that's where that sense of out of controlness feels. You're going to feel guilty, more stressed about, or incapable of taking time off or enjoying time taken off. Maybe you'll chalk self-care up as some luxury thing that you don't have time for. It's just a waste of time, or it's selfish, or it's just completely unnecessary. It's something maybe that you'll get around to if you can, if you think about it, or just only after you've fully exhausted yourself anyway. Any of that sound familiar? That's why the second foundational step is slow down for self-care. And I'll share it with you about Tamia. Tamia did not believe in self-care. She believed that if I'm going to spend time doing something else, it's just going to take away time that I already don't have being productive in the ways I want to be productive. So she was not for it. And she felt the ramifications, but she just had too much to do. She had too many people relying on her. Self-care was selfish for her. She just needed to be there for her people. Now, what happens was she multitasks as if it was her full-time job, which honestly it was, only to wind up as a result of that constant multitasking and inability or unwillingness to care for herself. She wound up feeling drained. Her brain was foggy. And it was really hard because she started feeling resentful towards everyone that kept asking her to do more. because she was already so tapped out from everything she was already doing. That led her to feel really annoyed that people couldn't see that she was stressed out. But then again, she didn't want people to see that she was stressed out. So she was kind of in this catch-22, right? So now she's resentful and annoyed and feeling drained, and none of that is who she identifies as. So she's disconnected from herself, doesn't feel like herself. She starts to feel fatigued, and medical and menstruation issues pop up for her. Now, at this point, she's starting to lose interest in intimacy, which is also really difficult for her in her relationship. And she starts struggling to sleep because the anxiety is so high and the frustration so high. Her phone's constantly ringing and dinging and amping up her anxiety time and time again. How many of you have your phones glued to you, huh? She essentially felt like a shell of who she knew that she could be, of who she knew that she was, of who she knew that she wanted to be. And she just didn't know what else to do, because as far as she was concerned, she had already done everything. And she had no time to do this self-care thing that was just going to take away from the time she already didn't have. And she's not alone in this experience. Slowing down for self-care is so important, and it matters because our brains and our bodies require maintenance. Just like any other thing of value in your life that you want to last, that you want to optimally function. Think of your car. You want to go from point A to point B and it's hundreds of miles away. What happens if you put gas in your car, you drive it and it runs out of gas, but you just keep on putting your foot to the metal, right? Pedal to the metal, keep trying to go, but there's no gas in there. Not only does it slow down and add unnecessary pit stops along the way, but it's also damaging your car when you do it over and over and over again. We are the same way. Our bodies are our vehicles to navigate through our lives, our journey here. And if we are not maintaining them effectively, appropriately, consistently, then we are impacting their ability to optimally function. We're impacting our quality of life. And the brain, it's not designed to multitask the way that society tells us we have to multitask everything all the time. And so the result of these two pieces is, and statistics support all of this, they show us that the result of these two pieces is reduced immunity, challenges with focus, inability or reduction in attention, performance decreases, productivity goes down, not up. This is going to lead you to feel more stressed out. And so the stress hormones, the cortisol in your body is going to be released more and more. And that is actually going to reinforce this to continue to happen, because the habits are increasing your stress levels and you're going to continue those habits, and therefore you're going to continue to increase your stress levels. And the ironic twist here is that the more you increase your stress levels, the more you kind of say, I can handle stress, the more you're welcoming in more stress, and therefore you're increasing your stress tolerance and almost saying, yes, give me more stress because I can handle it. Give me more stress because I can handle it, which is the opposite of what we want, right? Yeah, of course we want to be able to manage the stressors of life, but we don't want to add unnecessary stress and then say we can handle that and then add more unnecessary stress, right? We don't want that. So how do we do this? How do we slow down for self-care? It matters. Okay. Well, the first most important thing here is to understand what self-care is and what self-care is not, because people can get wrapped up in this. Just like Tamia, she was so averse to self-care because to her it was selfish. But self-care is not, I matter, no one else does, me first, you wait, no one else. That's not what it is. It's not selfish. Self-care is not about being luxurious with spending a bunch of money or doing this one-time splurge. That's not self-care. Okay. It's how it's spoken about quite often. And that's not self-care. That's not effective self-care. It's not sustainable. Self-care is, well, I want to maintain my body. I want to maintain my mind. I want to maintain my spirit, right? This holistic maintenance of ourselves, because I want to do well and feel good as me. Therefore, I can do well and help others better. That's what self-care really is. It is a way to frame your lifestyle. It's not an add-on. It is something that needs to be embedded within your lifestyle. When Tamia was able to reframe self-care, recognize the benefits, she then was able to incorporate it so she could sleep better. Over time, her intimacy interest was renewed and her medical issues reduced. She had this enhanced productivity at work, and this is what blew her away the most. She had this enhanced productivity at work, but she had better boundaries. She wasn't working so hard and exhausting herself all the time, and she felt clear-minded. So I'm going to ask you, how have you been thinking about self-care? Is it in a way that has been helping you? Is it in a way that has been hindering you? However you've been thinking about self-care, we want to get clear there, because if it needs to be adjusted, we want to make that adjustment. Now, there's this common hidden barrier that tends to pop up as we start examining self-care, all right? I see it all the time, and it tends to show up as what if, in some form of what if. So maybe, what if I stop doing this thing and then people don't like me? Or what if I don't do that as much and I disappoint someone? Or what if I'm rejected? What if they judge me? What if I'm not actually good enough? What if I'm a failure? What if they leave? What if I get hurt? What if, what if, what if? And they could go on and on and on. These what ifs we have to be aware of. And one of the ways we can be aware of that is with this foundational step 3. Believe that you belong. Why does it matter that you believe that you belong? Well, underlying those what ifs, it's really typically someone questioning their enoughness. You questioning your worth, your own inherent value, your belongingness. Because what if is almost like well, if I'm not doing this thing, what does that mean about me? Will I no longer be wanted? Will I no longer be of value? And we all psychologically, we have basic foundational needs hardwired within us, within our psychology, to experience, to feel safety, love, and belonging. And so if we feel there's a threat to that, we're going to respond. But when you're staying busy, constantly overcommitting, overworking, people pleasing, aiming for perfection or chronic high achievement to the point of exhaustion, that is often about proving enoughness. And typically I have to peel back a lot of onions together in order to get to this place, because most people don't realize this is what's going on, but it is an underlying factor that's connected to a fear that if you do not behave in this way, if you don't operate in this way, then somehow you're going to feel unsafe or unloved or not belonging in some way. Hidden. Often unrecognizable by most busy and ambitious folks, honestly, because you're spending your time and your efforts elsewhere, right? Although, I come across the occasional one who has this awareness but isn't sure what to do with it. Wherever you're at is okay. We don't need to make that wrong, but we do need to raise awareness so we can do something about it. What neuroscience shows us is there's this part of the brain, it's called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's essentially the error management system. They're like, oh crap, pay attention kind of part of the brain. Something's wrong, fix it. Part of the brain, okay? That error management system tends to be bigger, better, and more activated in people with symptoms like anxiety or self-criticism or perfectionistic type of mindsets, all right? Now, there's a strength here. The strength is that because your error management system is strong, it's highly activated, it's a strength because you're able to really discern pretty well that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. So you have good problem solving skills, you have good discerning skills. But suffering happens here if that strength is not used to your benefit. And that suffering happens when you're navigating these errors that you're finding, and you're finding plenty of them because you're good at it, it's a strength of yours. When you find these errors and the responsibility of fixing them falls solely on your shoulders, you bear that burden. Or when you make that error or whatever happens with that error means something about your worth or your ability or your identity or your enoughness. It gets tethered to who you are. And that's where suffering happens. Sarah's a really good example. She was a high achiever, super, super caring, compassionate leader, and she relentlessly served. I mean, she was a helper through and through. She really loved to support people. And people, for the most part, really loved Sarah. They loved her for her kindness, for her dedication, or they hated her for her happiness because she just seemed to be so happy and loving all the time. And for some people, that was hard for them. And she took that really personally. She didn't let that just roll off her shoulders. She took that really personally. And so no one knew that internally, she was actually constantly battling with herself about all of the things that she'd messed up and needed to redo, spending way more time than necessary on emails and text messages and what to say and how to say it, even though really what she's done is usually pretty good, according to someone else's standards. She was chronically worried about how others saw her, how they perceived her, what they thought about her, how they were judging her, what their assessment of her was. And so that actually led her to hold back on saying what she actually wanted or needed. So she wasn't sharing her needs. She wasn't really being heard, even though she was doing her best to hear everyone else. And she struggled with depressive symptoms, and she worked really hard to hide them. But at many points, she was wondering, like, what is the point of all this? If I'm just going to keep giving so much and still feel so void, what's the point? And she found that she'd overanalyze things incredibly more, so much more than she needed to. And she knew it. She could see that she was doing it, but she just couldn't stop it. She couldn't help it. She felt stuck, out of control, which was ironic because everyone looked at her. It seemed like she was in control. All of this stuff that was happening inside of her, it led her to really suffer in her relationships because she felt like she couldn't be true to who she was. If you can't share what you need, if you can't speak up and share what you are actually wanting, then how can you feel really fulfilled in your relationship, seen, heard, supported, right? And she was just feeling misunderstood, just not heard. It's lonely. It's a lonely place to be. And so she did try to fix it. She tried to fix it herself. She wanted to fix it herself. She tried to fix it multiple times, but it didn't work. So she ultimately just convinced herself, this is what it is. I have to suck it up. This is just life. But here's the thing. What's true about this situation and others like it is that just like Sarah, you and your life have a purpose. And part of that purpose is to enjoy your life and to love yourself. It is to believe that you belong so that you can embrace your belongingness in a purposeful way. Brain science even shows us this. Brain science shows us that the more stressed out you are, which if you are chronically having to defend yourself or feeling you have to prove your belonging, you are stressed, okay? The more stressed out you are, the less access that you have to a clear thinking mind, the less access you have to your creativity, the less access you have to being able to focus. Therefore, you will show up better in your life when you know and believe deeply, truthfully, inherently that you belong, that you don't have to overwork or overstress to prove that you belong. Listen, there is a 1 in 400 trillion chance of you as an individual being born. You belong. Your existence is intentional and a beautiful thing. And there are many who argue that it's even beyond a 1 in 400 trillion chance. We can retrain your brain to apply the strength of discernment, that part of your brain I was telling you about, the anterior cingulate cortex, to use this discernment as an opportunity to explore growth so you can grow, instead of tethering these errors to your sense of identity, your sense of worth, your sense of belonging. And as you get clear about your worth, as you really step into your belief that you belong, you're also going to have to get clear about what's actually been motivating you. And this is an area that can get sticky and tricky for a lot of people. We talk about motivation all the time in kind of common conversation, especially in the business space and things like that. But there's often a misconception about understanding our motivators. And that's why the foundational step number 4 is know what motivates you. Also known as claim your legitimate why, not these surface level whys. And here's some examples of very common surface level whys or some variation of them. Well, if I don't do it, who will? Of course I have to do it. No one else is going to do it, right? Well, everyone's depending on me, so I have to. Or, well, it's just what's expected. That it is what it is type of mentality. It's just what it is. This is how it is. I have to deal with it. Or, it makes me happy to make other people happy, so I'm just going to keep doing for other people. Or I don't have a choice. Someone has to pay the bills, right? Like it's my responsibility. It's got to get done. Or, well, this is the only way that I'll get ... So to obtain something. Or if I don't, I'm going to lose, right? This kind of avoidance of something. Or, well, I'd rather get it done and then deal with blah, 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 whatever that might be. These are all variations of very common reasons people give as to why they do what they do, as to what is motivating their behavior and their choices. Okay, responsibility is a big one. Now, Tom did this. Tom was a doctor, and he became a doctor, he said, because, well, when he was younger, a close family member had really struggled with medical issues, and doctors saved his life, and that changed Tom's life significantly. But his parents also had high expectations for him. They told him he needs to make good money, he needs to get a higher education. Inside, Tom really felt deeply, though, that he was called to help people that were suffering. He was called to help them heal. And by being a doctor, that was one of the ways he could apply his gifts to do that. And so he did. He went that path. Over time, though, the pressure to do well, to make good money, to manage the toxicity in the work environment, plus the liability, plus the red tape, with all of those external pressures going on, Tom lost sight of his initial passion, his initial drive to help heal people out of joy, out of his own internal passion, out of his own internal desire. What happened, because he lost sight of this, was he started to appear kind of rigid in conversations. And the reason that happened for him was because he was so stuck in his head about how someone else was viewing him, how they were evaluating him, how his coworkers might be saying X, Y, or Z about him, or about how he may be being watched because someone might want to hold him liable for something. Like, he was on his toes, right? On edge. And so he started appearing rigid in conversations because he was just so needing to be robotic almost to feel safe. He was trying to do everything right. He didn't want to be judged. He didn't want to have to worry about the liability, but he couldn't help but worry about the liability, right? His mind became so cluttered. His self-esteem just plummeted. And the self-criticism really amped up to the point where it felt like he couldn't control it. He started really struggling to find those right words. And so his communication started to dwindle a little bit. And that just made matters worse because it led to some careless mistakes. And then he felt guilty and ashamed and even more anxious about those mistakes that he had made. Now, this stress ultimately bled into his home. How can it not, right? If you're going into work every day, feeling stressed out every day, losing sight of why you're even there, just going to get through every day, just get through. Do we really just want to get through life, right? So that stress bled into his home. And his wife became really worried about him. They started to argue because she was worried and she wanted him to get help and he just didn't want to get help. I mean, back and forth, right? And because they were arguing, of course, then the kids became worried. And with all the stress, he started to pull back. He wasn't talking as much. He wasn't as physical. And so his health wasn't being as tended to the way that he had tried to before. So everyone was affected. Everyone was affected. He was making all of his life decisions based on these outward factors, these outward pressures. They had become his primary motivators. And honestly, he wasn't even sure if he knew what he enjoyed or internally desired anymore. It just felt so far off. This is why what motivates you matters. And we're going to talk about two forms of motivation. There's the external motivators, and then there's the internal motivators. Now, the external motivators are what we just talked about with Tom. They fuel you from the outside. They're things like money or recognition. And these aren't inherently bad, but they don't work long term. These are short-term fuels, right? Put the carrot in front of the horse or the rabbit to win the race kind of thing, right? It gets you through, but it doesn't keep things long-lasting. They're not intended to be long-lasting. And so Tom felt drained and overwhelmed because he was trying to use the short-term fuel for the long run. And many people do that. In fact, everyone that comes to me is doing that in some way and doesn't realize it. And that's one of the things we have to work on. He had just practiced it for so long. He had become accustomed to it that it was his habit. And so it's now a habit that would have to be broken. He had to create a different habit to make it kind of happen differently in his life, to find a different way to be motivated. That's just what he knew. His brain had gotten way used to it. And when your brain gets used to something, that means it's created an efficient pathway in your brain to keep doing that as fast as possible. That's what your brain wants to do. It wants to keep you safe. It wants to keep things efficient. All right. Now, your internal motivators are fueled from the inside. These are things like your hobbies and your passions. You're doing them for sheer enjoyment. You love doing them. They bring you joy. They make you smile, perhaps belly laugh. They feel relaxing or calming. It feels good to you. they're not done for any outward reward. Now, there may be outward reward that comes from them, but that's not why they are done. Okay, that's not why you are actually doing the thing like dance or cook or volunteering. You're doing it because you literally love doing it. It just brings you so much joy. This fuel is long lasting. It's inspiring. It's uplifting. It's plug in and charge kind of fuel. All right. It's the fuel that most people forget first. They forget about first, right? Because that's just not how society has conditioned us to live our lives. Tom had to learn how to tap back into this. He had to learn even what his internal motivators were. He had to learn how to reconnect with them. And so we did. Together, we took time, but he reconnected with why he desired his profession, what significance it had to him personally. He reconnected with who and how he wanted to be, what felt good for him, for how he would show up as a doctor, as a partner, and as a friend. And he had to repeatedly recommit to this reconnection in order to retrain his brain from that old habit to a new habit. And that's just necessary if we want to retrain our brain. And we know science tells us that we can, no matter our age. So whether you choose to navigate these foundational pieces I've shared so far or not, emotions are going to arise, all right? If we look back, Mark felt overwhelmed, Tamia felt resentful, Sarah felt hopeless and stuck, Tom was feeling anxious and ashamed. And so perhaps you have experienced this feeling of overwhelmed, right? The unending pressure, the responsibilities, the lack of time, or perhaps it's a lot of resentment. There's just a lack of support, a lack of appreciation, a lack of understanding. Maybe there's a lot of guilt or shame that you're not doing more, giving more, being more, even though it just doesn't matter how much you seem to do all that because it just never seems enough. Maybe you're feeling frustrated because you thought things would be different at this point. You've worked hard enough, right? At this point, why are things not different? Okay. And that's why the fifth foundational step is that you need to notice those feelings. We need to feel the feels. We're not giving them the steering wheel and letting them take over, but certainly we can't suppress them, push them down, avoid them, overly compartmentalize them, and expect to function well. We just can't. We're a social and emotional species. All right. Part of what sets us apart from other species is our ability to think and have our thoughts influence how we feel about ourselves, about others, about much more. And all this plays off one another. It influences the behaviors that we have, right? The decisions that we make. So if you're denying how you feel, you're literally denying a part of who you are, of what we are. And it will negatively impact you at some point. You can't get around it. You can try to push off as long as you want, but you can't get around it. Unprocessed emotions don't just disappear. They compound themselves over time. They'll find ways to sneak in and show up. The brain's designed to help us experience and process emotions. We're supposed to be integrating our brain and body together. That's how we optimally function, okay? So when we're attempting to thwart that process, we create a block. And that's where a lot of that chronic stress and kind of struggle and suffering comes in. I'm going to talk to you a bit about Justin to demonstrate this a little bit more. Justin was a powerhouse, high stress job, but amazing at what he did. He was getting stressed out though. I mean, his work was his life. And at home, one of his responsibilities, him and his partner, had, these are your responsibilities, these are mine, to be as efficient as they could at home. And so one of his responsibilities was taking out the trash. Maybe you have, maybe there's a responsibility at your home that you're in charge of, that you're needing to take care of. And so Justin, when he felt really stressed out at work, he would forget to take out the trash. And over time, it didn't take long, but over time, as he forgot to take out the trash when he's feeling really stressed, his partner would start giving him the cold shoulder because his partner was pissed that he wasn't taking out the trash, right? And that led Justin to feel really hurt because Justin's like, well, he didn't say this, but he was feeling like, I'm hurt because I'm stressed already, right? I have this powerhouse job and I want to do well. And so I'm super stressed out about it. And so the garbage is not on my mind. All right. And now you're giving me the cold shoulder. You're just stressing me out more, is essentially how Justin was feeling. And so he felt so hurt by this happening, but he convinced himself, oh, it's just trash. It's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. And so he did not say anything. He didn't say he felt hurt. He didn't say why he was forgetting to take out the garbage. He just kept quiet and he didn't say how he felt. So what happens? What do you think happens? Think about a time in your life when maybe a similar situation has happened for you. Over time, agitation grew, right? Because he felt more stressed out, and then he left out the, right, he forgot the garbage more, and now his partner was giving him the cold shoulder more and more. As the partner gave him the cold shoulder more and more, Justin felt more and more stressed out and now frustrated, right? And so he's intentionally forgetting the trash sometimes at this point. And so the gap grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're both not sharing how they're feeling. They're both not being heard. They're both not being understood. They're both choosing to not tap into their emotions, to not share their emotions, essentially to minimize and invalidate themselves, and then feeling frustrated at the other person, that the other person is doing things that are harming them, that are hurting them. Such a huge miscommunication issue, all because they didn't feel the feels. They didn't allow themselves to validate feeling those feelings and communicating them effectively. This just created more arguing, which they hadn't been a couple that really argued that much before, but it happens because it compounded, right? They felt hurt. We have to feel the feels. We cannot get around it. And if you try to get around it, it's going to compound itself. Justin had to learn how to acknowledge the feeling, how to acknowledge what it was that was coming up for him without being flooded by the emotion, but also without minimizing or numbing or dismissing that emotion. He had to learn how to manage it appropriately, label it, manage it, and actually do something with it, right? Communicate it to who it needed to be communicated to in an effective way. And once he could do that, it took practice, but once he could do that, he felt just closer, this closeness with his partner, which is what they both wanted in the first place, right? We all want that. Felt less stressed, and he was able to not just communicate better with his partner, but to receive communication better with his partner as well. So this reciprocal communication. He felt more heard, more understood, and just really able to be himself more. But with all of these 5 foundational steps that I've shared so far, how do we apply them, right? How do we apply them in a way that's effective, that's consistent, and also creates this sustainable impact? That's what brings us to the last, certainly not the least, foundational step. We have to recruit and accept we have to recruit and accept active accountability. Let me get a drink. Okay. Now, accountability, we all know, is important. I'm sure you all do your best to hold yourself accountable. If not, you go above and beyond to hold yourself accountable in some way. I'm not talking about just regular run-of-the-mill accountability here. That's why I added recruit and accept active accountability, okay? Because accountability really is powerful. Willpower, believe it or not, is consistently reported as the #1 reason why behavior change is not successful, why it doesn't happen, why someone doesn't follow through. And so even though you're independent and you're capable, right, you absolutely are. If you're here, then you are. I know it. It's not enough to say that you're going to hold yourself accountable. And I know that's hard. That was a hard pill for me to swallow. But statistics show us that up to a 95% increase in likelihood of successful change happens when there is specific accountability support in place. Okay, so we agree on the goals and we agree that I'm going to be the person that's going to hold you accountable, right? That accountability partner piece for a specific reason. And the thing is, your brain loves to do what you've gotten used to doing. It loves to be efficient. That's the whole we're creatures of habit type thing. So it's going to take accountability to retrain your brain to create different habits, because you have to untrain it from the habits you've created. And you have to do it consistently in order for it to stick, if you want that that change to happen and be sustained. That makes sense, right? Only consistency with retraining your brain is going to help those habits shift. There's not a real good shortcut there, okay? Now, of course, the choice is yours on what you choose to do, how you choose to implement this. The power is in your hands. Some people do choose not to invest in creating the change in their life, okay? Though instead, I've seen people invest in big vacations, hoping that if they go, they'll be able to escape their life and come back with things different, and it's not. Or they'll do big home remodels, hoping if we do this home remodel, like we'll feel better, our home will be more comfortable, and things will change. And It doesn't. Same patterns keep going. Or they'll do big splurges, whatever that may be, maybe a car or whatever, hoping that it will just bring them some relief or make them feel happy. And it doesn't. The relief is always and only fleeting because these foundational steps have not been laid. I know I did personally try to go it alone. I will absolutely be the first to admit it. I did that the majority of my life, and I've watched countless other people do it the same. It felt safer. It really did. But I can tell you that ultimately I had to step out and accept, I had to recruit active accountability in order to break through the walls that I simply couldn't break through on my own. This kind of go it alone mentality, it will take you somewhere. It will take you a certain extent. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to stand in my integrity and be honest with you. It will take you to a certain extent. You've probably experienced that. But the brain habits that I've been mentioning throughout this class today, the relationship patterns, the underlying beliefs that sneak in, they are going to kind of come up as a wall that you're going to feel like you keep hitting. And it's going to leave you feeling like you're at a standstill or lead you to burnout if you haven't already experienced that, right? There's this kind of breakthrough. I was talking to someone I'm supporting the other day, and this was kind of how it was described of. It was like there was this wall here, and suddenly as I was leaning on it, this door opened that I didn't even know was there, and I can walk through. That's the power, right? So what now? I want you to ask yourself, in the beginning of this class, I asked you what the costs are. What's it costing you to stay in this busy lifestyle? Maybe you're feeling exhausted, whatever it's looking like for you. It looks a bit different for everyone, but what's it costing you to stay here? And do those costs outweigh the benefits? Only you can answer that honestly. So I do ask that you answer that honestly for yourself. You deserve the honest truth. So if you want to actually feel in control, not constantly grasping for it, if you want to be more productive and impactful and successful without exhausting yourself chronically, if you want to enjoy your life more at work, at home, and in your relationships without losing yourself, without losing your time, without losing your energy, then I want you to know that it is possible. It is absolutely possible. It is possible for you. It is possible for you, okay? There's a customizable process that actually works. I just shared with you the 6 foundational steps that underlie this process. And this works regardless of your age. And even if you're super busy, even if you're highly ambitious, okay? No one else can do the process for you. No one else can step in and do it for you. The only quote unquote shortcut to less stress and more happiness is by committing to the process, by adding in the accountability piece, and having a willingness to be resourceful, okay? You don't have to sacrifice your ambition or your drive or your success to create meaningful and sustainable balance. You don't. Sometimes it feels that way, but you don't. Not with these foundational steps. You will have to be open to discovery, to new things, new methods, to managing your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions in a different way. And so as I promised you, I do have 2 ways today that I'm going to offer to you to support you. For the curious who are ready to explore, but maybe not yet ready to make a full commitment to jumping into the change process, I have a low-cost bundle for you. It's the Bust and Build Beliefs audio, and it also has an e-workbook package, okay? It's already on sale, but I'm adding on the 50% for you all today. And I'm going to give you that code below, and check it out. I've not seen anything else like it. It's really powerful if you allow yourself to engage with that process. But if you are committed, if you know I'm ready for that next step, I want to up level, I'm wanting to take charge of my life, I want the change, I want to experience the joy and the balance, and I want to know that I can maintain my ambition and my drive without losing these other pieces of me or my impact, my life, you know, the things that matter most to you, then I'm going to offer you 50% off a deep dive coaching session. Okay. So typically at the time of this recording, sessions are $200. And so you get 50% off of that. And here's the best part. If you choose to continue working with me, you're going to get all of that back. Everything that you pay for that session, you're going to get back, and it's going to be just applied to the next piece of our work together. Okay, so it's win-win no matter what. You're going to get clarity on that call. We're going to dive deep on that call, and I'm going to support you wholeheartedly on that call on what it is that it takes for you specifically to tame the busy based on what's happening for you in your life now. All right. So you're going to use code BUSY50 to snag these gifts, whichever one you choose, or maybe you choose both. Go for it. Right. And this is going to be in the chat box. I'll put it in. It's also going to be in your email. So make sure you check your email for hello@drtonicoaches.com because it will go to spam. And if you have further questions or you just want to find out more about working with me, again, that email is hello@drtonicoaches.com. And you can visit my hub at this link here, which I'll put in the chat as well as in your email. So make sure you check your spam box because I've had quite a few people have it go to their spam. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on this class today. I have been so excited to share it with you all. And again, I know many people are going to be chiming in on the replay. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself by showing up for this class. So much goodness in here. I hope you took great notes. Again, email hello@drtonicoaches.com and use that code in your inbox so you can get 50% off while it lasts.